A man named Charles Ponzi once had it all. He had a mansion, custom-made cars, expensive champagne, until it all came crashing down, and reality hit him harder than a train. I'm Liam, and this is Congame. Charles Ponzi was born Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Talvado Ponzi on March 3, 1882, in the town of Lugo in northern Italy. His parents, Oreste and Imelda Ponzi later said they were part of a wealthy Italian family that had become borderline poor by the time he was born. His mother retained a title known as Donna, showing that his family used to be rich. Ponzi is said to have expressed criminal tendencies early on, stealing from his parents and even parish priests. As a young man, he attended Piacenza University in Rome, where, by his own account, he was less than a model student. He made friends with all the rich boys and went with them to parties and events. As a result, after 4 years, Ponzi was forced to leave with no money and no degree. During his university years, he had heard stories of other Italians who had went to America to find fame and fortune and decided that was the only course left open for him. Ponzi arrived in Boston in November 1903 aboard the SS Vancouver. In his autobiography, The Rise of Mr. Ponzi, he claimed that he had left Italy with $200, but arrived in America with far less. The $200 had dwindled down to $2.50 on the way over, and a sharp card had taken me for most of it, and the tips in the bar and the rest of it, wrote Ponzi. Over the next few years, Ponzi managed to learn English and perform odd jobs. In The Rise of Mr. Ponzi, the self-styled jack-of-all-trades explained it like this: I tried my hand at everything, from grocery clerk to road drummer, from sewing machine repairman to insurance man, from factory hand to kitchen and dining room help. In some jobs, I lasted no time. In others, I lasted even longer. Often, I would be fired. Often, I would quit of my own accord, either disgusted or to avoid being fired. In his personal account, Ponzi fails to mention the reason for some of those firings, including theft and shortchanging customers. After moving to several cities, including Pittsburgh, New York, New Haven, and Providence, he ended up in Montreal, Canada, where he worked as a bank teller. He lost that job when the bank went under. As often was the case with Ponzi, he turned back to crime, which resulted in a 3-year stretch in prison in Quebec for forgery. After release, he began helping smuggle Italian immigrants into the United States. This would be followed by 2 more years in Atlanta prison after getting caught at that endeavor. Back in Boston on Memorial Day weekend, 1917, Ponzi, now 35 years old, noticed a young woman on a streetcar platform. One glance at her, he later wrote, at that picture of loveliness and the kindness and the clean vicinity. One look into her deep, dark, smiling eyes, at that pretty round face, framed in a background of gorgeous curls. I was no longer able to remove my eyes from her. Her name was Rose Gnecco, and in February 1918, they were married. For the next few months, Ponzi worked several jobs were his father-in-law's grocery store, an import-export company, and his wife's family fruit business, which failed shortly later. Rose was by Charles' side through tough times and during the dizzying ride to riches, including a 12-room mansion, servants, a custom-built limousine. He stayed with him when the scheme failed, and even when he went to jail for mail fraud, and beyond that for 2 years after his divorce. They finally divorced in the mid-1930s. In 1919, after having him set up in a small export-import business, Ponzi received a letter from a Spanish company requesting an advertising catalog. Inside the envelope, he found an IRC, International Relay Coupon, a type of voucher accepted in various countries in exchange for local postage stamps. Ponzi quickly realized the money-making potential of taking advantage of exchange rates differences to buy IRCs in one country and redeem them in the other. In his own flowery prose, Ponzi described that moment. The racket of the international relay coupons actually fell in my lap like a ripe apple. I did not have to shake the tree to get it. I just reached over where it had fallen and took it. It looked good, luscious. I examined it for flaws. Found none. I had to take a bite. I wouldn't be human if I didn't. At this point, Ponzi had discovered a practice known as arbitrage, the simultaneous purchase and sale of an asset in two different markets. Tiny differences in price allow for the modest profit. In this case, buying IRCs in Italy for one price and exchanging them in higher price postage stamps in the US would create significant profit when done at scale. If Ponzi had stopped there, he would have been free and clear. One of the first practitioners of what later to be called the Ponzi scheme was a woman named Sarah Ho, who started the Ladies Deposit Corporation, a savings bank targeted toward unmarried women in Boston in the late 1970s. Ho promised an interest rate of 8% per month, which she pulled by paying early depositors with funds from new customers. This is the very definition of a Ponzi scheme. In 1920, Ponzi organized a company called Security Exchange Corporation, in which he sold stock promissory notes, advertising a 50% interest after 90 days. The funds obtained by investors were supposed to be buy IRCs to be redeemed in the U.S. Instead, Ponzi used funds obtained by new investors to pay off old investors. By way of doing this, Ponzi blamed the Universal Postal Union for suspending the sale of IRCs once it learned about his coupon redemption scheme. After attempting to get around the suspension, Ponzi shifted to his rob Peter to pay Paul scheme. For a while, it worked. He raked in $50 million, $220 million in 2000 in money today, in the first 8 months of 1920. He kept the scheme going by telling investors that he had created an elaborate network of agents buying IRCs for him overseas, where he could redeem in the United States for a tidy profit. In fact, there was no elaborate network of coupon buyers. He was using the new investments to pay off old investors. As of January 27, 2013, the U.S. Postal Service no longer sells IRCs. International reply coupons purchased in other countries may be exchanged in the U.S. for first-class mail international 1-ounce letter-size stamp per coupon. In July 1920, the Boston Post ran a flattering front-page feature on Ponzi, pegging his net worth at $8.5 million. Less than a week later, the U.S. Post Office Department announced a new conversion rates for the International Postal reply coupons, though officials said the rate change had nothing to do with Ponzi. Investigations of Ponzi ensued, but little made progress until the Boston Post launched its own investigation, which generated bad press, causing Ponzi to decline new investments. This caused a run by current investors, and Ponzi reportedly paid out more than $1 million. More bad press from the Post ultimately sealed Ponzi's fate. He was eventually convicted on federal charges of mail fraud and served 3.5 years in prison. Upon parole, he was convicted of state charges, jumped bail, and was caught and went to prison again, getting out in 1934. At that time, he was deported to his native Italy, having never become a U.S. citizen. His history in Italy and Brazil is not very well documented, though it is known that he died on January 18, 1949, in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro, leaving just $75 to pay for his burial. 6 of the best known and largest Ponzi schemes of the 20th and 21st century include 2016 to 2018. BitConnect's cryptocurrency investment program scam ended with a market capitalization of $2.6 billion. 2012. Alan Stanford conducted a Ponzi scheme through his Stanford International Bank that scammed investors out of $7 billion. 2008. Tom Peters stole $3.65 billion through his firm, Peters Corporation Incorporated. 2008. Bernie Madoff, former chairman of Nasdaq Stock Exchange, scammed investors out of $65 billion, making it the largest Ponzi scheme in history. 1994 to 2003. Mutual Benefits Corporation con 2,800 terminally ill people out of $1.1 billion in one of the most egregious Ponzi schemes of all time. Charles Ponzi was the most flamboyant early practitioner of a scheme where the fraudster creates a plausible investment, gathers investors, and then uses the money from newer investors to pay off the older ones, while raking in a tidy profit. He wasn't the first one to think of this, but he is the person who gave his name to this practice. The same technique was used by Bernie Madoff, who stole $65 billion. Ponzi is responsible for stealing $220 million in today's money.